Hey, what is up, beautiful beings of Earth and beyond? Welcome to Cosmic Origins. My name is Jace. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the first successful mission of the Space Force. We're going to be talking about the recent briefing from the military officers during the COVID-19 Task Force daily briefing. We're going to be talking about what the Fed is doing right now and how that's affecting cryptocurrency and where that might be going. And we're going to be tying some other miscellaneous stuff into all of that. So let's get this started. First off, thank you guys for being here so much. You probably notice, if you're keen, only if you're keen, that I'm outside. And I thought it would just be nice to get outside of the studio that I normally film in, the room, and get some fresh air. And, during this quarantine, we're all kind of sheltering inside, and a lot of us, all of us really, are doing a lot of inner work, and it's good to get outside, right? So I thought that would be a good vibe for the video. So wanted to do that. Please share, like, comments, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you feel called to support this channel, you can do so down below. And let's go ahead and get into the stories for today. So coming over to here, actually that's not what I want to show first. What is showing? There we go. Okay, so I went to go make a video on this last week and totally got messed up. I was trying to do this cool background effect with the rocket, and the rocket had audio on the video, and I didn't know the audio was going to play, and so the entire 30 plus minute video that I did was drowned out by just the heavy noises of a rocket launch. And so I posted a blooper from that video as the last video on my channel. And so I'm going to briefly cover this. Instead of doing a super long update, I'm going to just kind of cap what I was talking about. So Space Force has officially left the planet. We have launched the first contracted payload for Space Force. And this is really important because first off, obviously it's the first mission, which is always important. But what this mission did was complete a new setup, a new constellation of military communication satellites. So this might sound a little bit familiar if you've been following Q, and that's because last year Q led us through a series of operations that were going down that had to do with the old military intelligence and CIA intelligence, presumably, network of satellites going down. And so what this meant was that they took out these key satellites that were essential to the deep state's communications network. And now we are seeing the implementation of a completely new communication system by the Space Force. And ironically, the old system, what Q was calling it, was Corona. So over a year ago, we got all these cryptic operational command strings that were supposed to be interpreted internally. These weren't necessarily for the public. And what those command strings said were Corona whatever offline, Corona 2 offline, Corona 4 offline, until all the Coronas were offline. Now, pretty ironic that those satellites were called Corona way back then. Now, does that have ties to the current, issue and pandemic we're facing? Probably, but who really knows? So what's really fascinating about this is that this is kind of a Q-proof, because we're seeing the military, the new military intelligence apparatus, the Allied non-deep state one, put up a new communications constellation. So a whole new constellation, meaning multiple satellites that have a particular patterned orbit where they can communicate with each other. We're getting a whole new one. And this is what this is a quote from one of the articles. They said, quote, "If the Space Force mission succeeds, the U.S. military will be able to bring online a new constellation of communication satellites. With the satellite that's being launched today in place, the military will finally be able to replace the outdated network it's been relying on." So that's really important. The other thing I wanted to bring into this was what the Space Force is really replacing in this case. So I, from the beginning, have been a firm, I want to say concluder, not believer, because belief can sometimes be, you know, not have conclusions or, evidence behind it. And so I'll say I've been a concluder from the beginning that the one of the primary missions of the Space Force was to provide oversight for unacknowledged and off-book secret space projects and black budget space projects. So we have all these different groups that from the military intelligence to the military itself, like Air Force, Navy, to the defense contractors like Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon. We have all these groups which have for decades been conducting their own secret high technology projects off books. And these projects, as many of us have studied the secret space programs, have been very, very advanced in their scope. Like we're talking solar system and potentially beyond travel, but at least to the other entities within our solar system. And we're talking technologies that are far beyond propulsion technology. We're talking about essentially what would be considered anti-gravity, but electromagnetic gravitic, uses electricity and magnetism to create anti-gravity effects rather than Newtonian-based propulsion, which is never really going to get us anywhere substantial in terms of interstellar travel. And most people know that. We need something far more advanced in terms of our energy systems, transportation. So Space Force, in my opinion, was created by this alliance that is taking down the deep state to create oversight on these programs and eventually disclosure of these programs, which have run off books for so long. And one of the key things that I'm seeing happen here is that the old program, the old space program, one of them was called the NRO. This was the National Reconnaissance Office, and they were one of the big five intelligence agencies. People often called them the Space CIA or the Space NSA, and you probably have never heard of them unless you've researched this stuff. I have been following it for years because I used to be in school for aerospace engineering, and I was actually the president of my aerospace society at our college, Cal Poly. And when I was the president, I went to the base a lot, sometimes other people did, to watch rocket launches. And I would get like military clearance sometimes to go on base and watch some of these rocket launches live and in person. And man, that is one of the craziest things to experience. I mean, I talk about rockets being like kind of old school technology, but to actually see a rocket take off is pretty freaking crazy. And it's not something that I, hope to see for the rest of my life. I hope that ends. But if you get a chance to see a rocket launch while this is still a thing, it's pretty crazy. And so, anyways, the main group that was doing these rocket launches was the NRO. So the NRO was sending up the satellites. They call them payloads. And these payloads were the size of school buses, the biggest ones, and bigger. So they were launching on Atlas V rockets, which were the biggest rockets that ULA has. ULA, the United Launch Alliance, is the aerospace manufacturer. It's Boeing and Lockheed joint venture. They create the rockets. So they create the rockets. That's the Atlas V and others. The NRO, the intelligence agency, the Space CIA, launches the satellites through the ULA rockets. Okay, you follow me? So the ULA was also a big deep statey group. I actually met the CEO of the ULA when I was the president of the Aerospace Society. And now I'm not going to get too deep into my thoughts on the whole thing, but this guy, I'll just say he is outspoken about being a Templar. His two books that he's published are about how being a Templar has affected his business life, right? And he's the CEO of this group. And so they're launching the rockets for the NRO, right? Again, classified payloads that are bigger than school buses that nobody knows what's going up into space. And these are bigger than school buses. So lots of infrastructure that's being put up into space secretly. That's why Space Force needed to come in, create oversight over these programs, and then slowly disclose them over the preceding years, the following years. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say about that. So we have the Space Force basically taking over the role of the NRO in a way, right? Like the NRO might still be involved, but they are not the sole entity overseeing these space missions for the deep state. And if you just go ahead and do an internet search real quick for NRO mission patches, and you will see all sorts of weird occultic stuff. If you're familiar with like the Yaldabaoth entity, the octopus being, tentacle being around the Earth, they have a mission patch for that, where it's a big octopus taking over the Earth. They have like dragons in their patches, and their logo, their main logo is an owl, and their slogan is "We own the night." So super occultic, right? So again, these industries are controlled by cults. They're controlled by dark occultic groups, from aerospace to politics to Hollywood. This was the old paradigm. We've now shifted into a new paradigm where this alliance has taken over and is been in a civil war for so long to get this stuff out into the public. So microcosm, macrocosm there. Let's move on. I wanted to make sure I gave that its due time, though, because I did spend a half an hour plus on it before. Another kind of proof that this is a positive thing, Don Jr. is tweeting about it, endorsing it. So yeah, Space Force is a good thing for the future. Now, I want to move on to what we saw during the task force daily briefing 2 days ago. Okay, so typically Trump brings the task force with, Dr. Fauci and the other doctors and Pence, and sometimes Bill Barr has been up there, but that's like only happened once or twice. And so this time they started the briefing with Bill Barr, who is of course, the Attorney General, head of the Justice Department, and all these decorated military figures, and had pictures in the background of like Navy ships and all sorts of stuff. And basically what they announced was that the militarization of COVID-19 would be increasing, and particularly that they were using this time period to go after the cartels. They were using this to be a strategic time period to enact military operations against dark forces. So if you're watching this and you maybe haven't seen my previous videos and you're wondering, okay, why is that important? Or maybe you're a little nervous because you're like, military, pandemic, ooh, this sounds like martial law. That doesn't sound good. Well, again, what we've been watching develop over these past few years with the Q operation, which is very succinctly put for new people, Q operation, military intelligence operation from good people, white hats within military politics, intelligence and politics, that have been fighting a civil war for the spiritual forces of good on the planet. And so what we're seeing, what we've been watched developing over the past few years, is this these leading up to a state of mass arrests occurring for these bad actors, as Q would call them, for these dark bad people, really. Everything from human trafficking, drug trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, pedophilia, all sorts of nasty stuff, right? So what they really are focusing on in this briefing is the drug trafficking with the cartels. Well, drug trafficking is almost always coupled with human trafficking. So what they're telling us is that there is about to be a huge military action and series of operations that are going to occur likely over the next few weeks. And we know this has already been happening. There were 600 plus cartel operatives arrested about 2-3 weeks back in the biggest military sting against the cartel within the country of all time. Biggest mass arrest, 600 plus people. The next week, 300 plus Saudi officials in Saudi Arabia were arrested for corruption charges. So we're seeing on even the very tangible mainstream level these mass arrests occurring. And now we have these military generals get up in front of the COVID-19 task force and brief the entire country on what is happening. They didn't need to do this, right? They don't need to tell the country if they're going to go after some cartel guys in the Southern Hemisphere. They don't need to brief that before COVID-19. So why did they? because this is so much bigger than most people are seeing right now. This military operation, these mass arrests, are directly tied in to the way that the U.S. is handling the pandemic. Now, I'm not saying the pandemic isn't real. I think the virus is still real. I think it was still a bioweapon created by these dark groups. But the good guys, the Alliance, has taken advantage of this situation to conduct operations against these dark forces, right? So I want to go over just the main highlights that I wrote down from what these guys said. So they said this was an advanced counter-narcotics operation. They said it was, quote, a critically important time for this operation. They said the drug cartels are taking advantage of COVID-19 and are planning on certain attacks, essentially, is what they were inferring, is that they're taking advantage of this time to ship more drugs in, and they were hinting at, maybe violent acts or military-type attacks occurring. And again, why would this happen? Well, the cartels are one of the main physical armies for the deep state and for the dark elite. They've been using these gangs and these cartels as their armies to do their trafficking and that kind of stuff. So naturally, if mass arrests are going to occur, there's probably going to be some kickback. There's probably going to be a fight. And that's why I truly believe they've been telling us to stay inside, because there could be a conflict occurring. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm personally not worried about this at all. I think if we listen to the advice that the Trump administration and the Alliance and the federal government specifically at this time is giving to the people, we're going to be fine. There's no need to worry. But there is the potential in maybe some of the larger cities, in some of the places where there are these deep underground military bases that are being infiltrated and taken back for the light, there's a chance that there's going to be some fighting. And some of you may have felt this on a spiritual level. Some of you may be feeling a lot of chaos in the amount of, just kind of the spiritual realm, chaos in general, entities may be causing some damage that they normally wouldn't, or maybe more psychic attacks than normal or that kind of thing. And I think that's because these entities, looking at this from a spiritual perspective, these entities which have been working with these dark groups and these terrorists and these traffickers, the entities that are feeding off them are being released from their imprisonment in a way. And, as these physical humans get arrested, the entities that were feeding off of them are probably not going to want to feed off of them anymore when those guys get turned over to the light. So what I'm noticing with a lot of people reporting is that there's kind of an abundance of these entities that are trying to figure out what to do and where to go and who to latch onto, right? So this is another reason to be aware of your mind-body-spirit complex, right? Be aware of what is you and what is not you. When maybe you suddenly get really angry, you got to ask, is that because I'm releasing like an inner trauma, or is this because there's something that's trying to mess with me and I'm letting it mess with me? And both are happening, right? And either way, they're all catalysts for positive change. So all these things are ultimately good things that are happening. And these are all symptoms of the dark coming over to the light in a way. Going back to the main things, they said that it's a critically important time for the operation, right? Because obviously, because of the lockdown, this is a critical time for them to conduct operations like that. They don't want people escaping. They want people in their homes so that they're not in the crossfire, that kind of thing. They mentioned that 70,000 Americans die every year from the drug trafficking market. They said they are at war with the cartels, which is a thing that Trump had alluded to several months ago, calling the cartels a terrorist organization. Because when you label something as a terrorist organization, there's certain legal and constitutional rights that you have to take action on a terrorist organization versus other groups. So labeling the cartels terrorist actually authorizes military forces to go in and deal with it. So they said they're at war with the drug cartels. Again, cartels are an arm of the deep state. It would be a mistake they said, quote, "It would be a mistake with terrible consequences for any adversary to attempt to do us any harm during this health crisis or forever." Which was a huge statement, right? So they kept saying over and over, you meaning the cartels, the bad guys, you better not try to do anything to the U.S. right now because you will face the full military force. Anybody who tries to come into the United States to traffic illegally will be faced with military force. So this is a huge warning to these groups not to mess with us at this time. Kind of a threat in a way to try to mitigate any kind of backlash from these dark groups as they go down. So again, something to just keep in the back of your mind throughout all this. Something I also want to tie into this is this idea of the 3 days of darkness. The 3 days of darkness is something that's been talked about for years as a spiritual shift, right? Like as a part of the ascension, you might have heard that there would be a moment after a solar sneeze or a solar micronova where the magnetic field would go down and we would go through this crazy 3 days of darkness. Well, the 3 days of darkness that's being talked about now contextually is a different thing. David Wilcock is the one who recently discussed this, and if you didn't watch his video, what he said, whatever you think of David Wilcock, either way, he said that his intel told him that he was allowed to tell people that there would likely be a 3-day communications outage where there'd be no internet, there would be no phone except for emergencies. You'd still be able to call 911 and emergency services likely, but that there would be no communications and that this would last 3 days. Some people have speculated 10 days of darkness type thing. But either way, whether you trust or believe David or not, he is only one of several people that have mentioned this time period of comms going dark. And so I want to just put that out there to prepare people. I don't think this is anything that you would need, more than a week's worth of food and supplies and stuff. I don't think it's even going to be that long. I'm really vibing with a short time period, if it even has to happen, because this might not even be something that needs to happen. It's all kind of fluctuating in the moment, right? So it depends if the benefits outweigh the negatives of shutting down the country for whatever period of time. Because if they don't need to, it might not need to happen. But if it needs to happen, then it will, and we will be prepared for it. And we will know at that time period to just stay in ourselves, stay inside, be with our families, use it as a time to connect with your families and your loved ones, use it as a time to do inner work, to reflect. And then when things come back on, it's going to be a very different and hopefully a much more healed world, or a world that has set the stage for the healing to occur, because the catalysts will have occurred for the healing to take place. So another thing that David had mentioned was that when the lights come back on, so to say, that there will be a 24-hour television and internet stream of an 8-hour segment of basically what the heck has been going on in the world, who the deep state is, the cults that have been running the various industries for so long. Who knows how deep really they will get, but his interpretation was that it was going to be like a full-blown satanic elitists have been running the world kind of thing, which would be huge for the population of the world. And one thing that David tied into this that I really, really liked and that I have thought of a lot myself is there's a quote in the Law of One channelings where Ra says something along the questioner asks basically, what is the is there a chance or is there a likeness of there being some large event where most of the people in the world will be able to go onto this positive timeline? Because Ra was saying basically that the current kind of timelines in flux, we're not having a very large amount of people go onto the new timeline because so many people were still lost in the old ways and they were wrapped up in all the old karmas and haven't been doing that kind of work on their awareness of what's really going on. And Ross says something along the lines of that there is an ever possibility that in one full swoop that all of humanity could be pushed up onto this higher timeline of the world turning into a really positive place. And I've thought about that so many times over the past couple of years. And this could really be that. This could be that defining thing. You know, however bad this pandemic really is, it could have that really positive effect where so much of the world is going through this negative thing together that it acts as a catalyst for positive change for the inner and the outer. So the individual, but then the entire planet. And it provides that catalyst for everybody. So this could really be that huge timeline shift for humanity where we are all put on, or like, you know, a good 80, 90, 100% of us put on to that positive timeline. I think we should keep that in our manifestations because that is the best case scenario. And the best case scenario seems like it's very attainable. So yeah, that was I kind of took that in a bit of a different direction, but that was the briefing. Okay. So to kind of tie this in, Russia, this isn't something I'm going to spend a lot of time on, just mention it real quick. Russia sees no epidemic but starts shutdown. So more evidence that, there's way more going on. This is, while it might be a real virus, is being used as a catalyst to create positive change in the world. And Russia going on lockdown, they're also dealing with their deep state. China's dealing with their deep state. Like every part of the world has their shadow that is being transmuted, right? German state financial minister kills himself over coronavirus to spare. So again, more things happening to these elite figures that are outside of the norm. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Just thought that was interesting. I think we'll be seeing more of that kind of stuff. Okay, so on Federal Reserve information, I believe I talked about this in a previous video, but I wanted to touch on it again and add some more context. So there was a Q post made recently that linked to this tweet that is a Yahoo article called "The Fed's Cure Risks Being Worse Than the Disease." And in the article, they essentially explain from their biased deep state perspective how Trump and the federal government have essentially taken over the Federal Reserve, and how the Treasury is essentially taking over all the options of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is being used as the bank for the Treasury's I don't want to say agendas because that has a bad connotation, but the Treasury's motives, the Treasury's mission, I'll say. And the biggest quote from this article was, "This scheme essentially merges the Fed and the Treasury into one organization. So meet your new Fed chairman, Donald J. Trump." Now, of course, Yahoo, being mainstream media, paints this as being a really bad thing, but I'll tell you why it's not. And that is because this is the end of the federal banking cartels. This is the end of central banking cartels and the Federal Reserve. So, quick outline of how central banking works. You have these private banks, which are the world elite, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, the richest people in the world, that go into developing countries and set up their private bank as the treasury, basically, and loan money to those governments in exchange for interest. And so the governments borrow money from this private bank, and they are forever indebted and enslaved to those banks because there's no way you can ever pay them off because you're borrowing money from them to pay them back with interest. So you have you have a system that is inherently corrupt, and the U.S. has been under this as well. We have the Federal Reserve, private bank that is permanently putting us in debt. And so one of the things we've been following for years is that Trump and the alliance are trying to end the Federal Reserve. They're probably going to put us back on the gold standard. They're at least going to restructure the Fed so that it is nationalized. And that is what we're seeing. We're seeing the Fed nationalized. And David even said this in his video too. He mentioned that the Federal Reserve is being nationalized by the Trump admin. And so, yeah, this is huge. And so what I think they're doing is right now, first I'll show you this. The Fed president has declared that there's no end in our ability to print money, and Congress has told us to do so. So why is that relevant? Well, they're basically saying they have an endless supply right now to just print as much money to get it into the economy as possible. Now, there's kind of two sides to this, because on the one side, on the more 3D side, this is scaring a lot of people, especially people that are invested in fiat currency and the dollar, because they're going, whoa, the Fed has just pumped $6 trillion into the economy. $6 trillion they've just put in the economy. That's going to create massive amounts of inflation. The worth of the dollar is going to go down, blah, 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 right? And that's affecting, I wanted to tie in, the crypto markets. So the crypto markets are going, whoa, Trump is pouring all this, or Trump is having the Fed put all this money into the economy. But at the same time, this article, they think that Trump is indirectly supporting Bitcoin, because what's going to happen is that the Bitcoin market and the cryptocurrency market is about to skyrocket because people are losing their faith in fiat money. So I want to tie this in because I personally have been getting a lot of synchronicities and patterns in my life to look into cryptocurrency more. Now, previously, I was pretty judgmental and not understanding of crypto. I pretty much just wrote it off as being kind of even worse than fiat money, because it wasn't, there's no physicality to it. It's not backed up by anything tangible. It's backed up by computer algorithms. And I was like, well, that's not good. That's the AI direction. And I still think if that ran out of control, that is the AI direction. And we don't want to go deeper that direction on a negative timeline. But I've been seeing a possibility of us moving over to internet based currency for the new paradigm while we shift things. And evidence of this is that the Fed and the Federal Reserve and the Feds have announced that they're likely going to be creating a digital US dollar. And so with all that news, the Bitcoin community and the crypto community are like, heck yeah, like this is really good for us. And it made me realize that the whole reason people like crypto is because they were not a fan of the traditional banking systems. They saw the flaws that all of us see in the stock market, in the banking systems, in the central bankings, and they were like, we don't want any part of that. We want to go over here, do our own thing, create a cap on the amount of money they have, which is basically the same as the gold standard, because there's only a finite amount of gold. There's only a finite amount of each crypto coin. So you have the value of it constantly increasing basically forever until there's a median of people using it and it becomes whatever average system. And so I see a timeline where we are going to, on behalf of the Alliance, have this new network of positive internet, maybe run by the Space Force or something. But there's going to be a new type of internet after this shift. And this internet is going to be global and free, and it's going to be actually be for the people. It's going to have fail-safes so that the dark forces can't use it for corruption like the old internet, which was just way too open for that kind of stuff. And with this new internet, I honestly see a new type of currency coming in. It could be the current cryptocurrency markets continuing and evolving into that. It could be something new, but I believe that something along that lines is going to happen. And that's why I was getting these like downloads or synchronicities messages from Spirit to like look into this more and understand it more. And I've learned so much since just these past couple days. That's why I haven't put out a video because I've been researching and learning so much about the cryptocurrency markets and everything. And it's a really pivotal time for it. So with that said, I am also accepting any kind of donations that people want to give for in cryptocurrency. So I have like PayPal and Patreon down below if you want to support, but this opens up a new avenue for people to support this channel. So if you have crypto and you work with crypto, I could definitely use a little bit of a boost because I've only been messing around with like $100 just to kind of understand the market and understand the works. But I see this as being really positive. So if you feel like you would like to support me and what I'm doing here on this channel, and that way I'll have like a Bitcoin link down below that you could donate if you feel called to. But that is what I'm seeing going on with that. So did I cover everything? I want to make sure. So basically all this money being pumped into the Fed. Oh, so the other side of that I wanted to cover was, there we go. Oops, I went black for a second. The other side of that I wanted to cover was that I feel like with all of this money going in from the Federal Reserve, you know, the 3D side of things are kind of freaking out over their security and fiat money. But I believe there's going to be an entire financial reshift, and that they're draining the Fed with all the energy that it has before they dismantle it. So rather than just shut it down, why not utilize all that fake money to stimulate the economy while it still has a real impact on the economy? Because even though it's fake money and they can print infinite amount, them printing that fake money is still creating a physical, tangible impact on people's lives. Like, you know, we're going to be getting these stimulus checks in the mail or direct deposit. That's going to be at least $1,000, if not a couple thousand, if you have a family. And that has a real tangible impact, right? Like you can go and buy things with that for right now. So I believe that they're going to drain the Fed for as much as it's worth, put all of that energy and potential into the Treasury, and then reset and reboot the entire economy with hopefully a new kind of dollar that doesn't have the all-seeing eye on the back. That would be really nice. So that's what I'm seeing coming. Crypto could be a very big part of that with their announcement of this new digital US dollar. So I'm excited to see where things go. It's very interesting times. All right, that's we're almost done. I think there's only one other thing I wanted to point out, and that was this post that Melania Trump put up of World Autism Day in the White House, and the White House being lit up blue in honor of World Autism Day. So, why is that important? Well, Kabamir points out here that back in April 3rd, wow, that's 2 years to the date. April 3rd of 2018, Q said bunker. We know that bunker is an allusion to the White House. That's been established before. Bunker, forest, blue, plus, April showers. Ooh, that sounds like it could be promising. So the bunker is blue. I don't actually know the connection to forest. So if you are keen to that, feel free to point it out. April showers. So big things could be happening in April. Also, there are 5 columns pictured here. A 5th column is any group of people who undermine a larger group from within, usually in favor of an enemy group or nation. Infiltration instead of invasion. So this is what the Dark Forces did, right? This is how they took over the United States. They didn't, the dark, I just say the Dark Forces to kind of put it simply. But the deep state, the dark powers, the powers that were, they didn't come in and take over the United States by, invading us with a military. They put people in positions of power that were allegiant to other countries before our country, and that were allegiant to very dark cults, and that they infiltrated instead of invaded. So that is what that means. So this could be very promising for things happening in April. And I'm just going to check my notes one more time. Yep, I think that's everything. So cool. Thank you guys for sticking around. I'm glad that I got this covered in 39 minutes. I'm going to try to keep these shorter because I know a lot of people have, I've been getting just advice that, short videos are better because it's hard to watch an hour-long video, and I totally agree with that. Like, it's hard to watch anybody for an extended period of time. So if you're still around and you're still watching this, I'm super, super grateful. Thank you. It's an honor that you, come here for information, and I'm really grateful for that. So if you can, subscribe, share, if you feel supported, or if you feel called to support financially, you can do so down below in the links. It would help me out a lot. And thank you guys again, and I will see you all in the next video. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say is that Alexis and I, my beloved partner, we have a podcast together. It's called the Divine Sovereign Beings Podcast. A lot of you have probably seen it. I've been posting those on her channel because she has a bigger following than I did, and when we started making them, I hadn't started making content on here again. And so I just want to say I'm going to start posting those on here as well. So we're likely going to film one today or tomorrow. And it's going to be her and I talking about a lot of different stuff. Some of this stuff, some stuff that she's brought, giving our divine masculine, divine feminine counterpart opinions and energies into it. And people have really, really been very nice about the reception that we've been getting. So I'm going to start posting those on here. So if you see that, don't freak out. This is me letting you know. So thank you guys again, and I will see you all next time. Peace out. Love you all.